Hi team, I hope you are doing great and working on the project that I am sharing in this playlist. We already worked upon the development part of our project. Now it's time for deployment part. Deployment means what? We need to create a distribution file that can be installed into a system for final deployment, right? And to create the distribution file, we need setup.py. Setup.py is something which will convert your application into a distribution file that can be installed into a system for final use for the user. If it can be installed into your system, it can be installed into my system, then it can also be installed in the server. Okay, and if it can be installed on the server, it can be used by real users, isn't it? So to create this distribution file or the installable file, we'll make use of setup tools. Setup tools is a Python module through which we do what? We create the setup.py file, or we convert our application into a distribution file. Now on setup tools, I already created a tutorial video in my playlist over here. If you see Python distribution with setup tools, in this video I used a very simple example to explain how setup tools can be used and how setup files can be created. In case if you have doubt and you want to understand it right from the scratch, please go through this particular video to understand how setup tools can be used. My name is Vipul and I'll be with you in this particular journey. So let's get started. Alright, so this is our project structure. We have a ML project in which we have a loan app. In the loan app we have a config, datasets, processing, train model, version, pipeline, predict, training pipeline, and manifest. Next, we have a test folder in which we wrote the test script and we tested our application through PyTest. Next, we have a readme.md, which is a project documentation, and requirements.txt, in which we mentioned all the requirements, all the dependencies that is required for our application to run. That means in any system in which my application is going to execute, these modules should be there. In requirements.txt, we need to mention one more thing that we had not mentioned, which is called PyTest. Why? Because we are also using PyTest for testing our application. Now, what version of PyTest we should use, that we need to check. So let's check the version of PyTest that we need to use. So this is my command prompt. I will trigger the Python interpreter over here. I'll import PyTest. Okay, and then I'll check the version of PyTest that I'm using while developing our application. So it's 8.3.4. So we need to mention over there 8.3.4. All right. So this is done now. We will move ahead to the same project documentation. Now we'll create a setup.py over here in which we'll mention few things to create the final distribution file of our application. So here I already created the setup.py in which we are going to mention few things about our project. So let's get started with the setup.py. So for setup.py, there is a code that you have to write. That code I had already shared on my GitHub. This is a GitHub. In the GitHub repository, I already shared the code about the setup.py. So this is the thing that we are going to use. First, we have to import OS, and then we have to import setup tools and find packages. Find packages will help us in finding the package that we want to convert into the final distribution file. And setup will be used as a function over here. In this setup, we'll mention different information about our project, like name, version, and everything, which will help us to use, or you can say to get the information about your application whenever someone wants to get the information about your application. So these two things we have to import. So first I'll do what? I'll just copy this thing and I'll import it. Okay. Next we have to do what? We have to mention the metadata of the package. Metadata. In the metadata, we need to mention few things such as name, description, URL, email, author, and requires Python. Now let's put the values for these guys. Name will be the name of your application, so it can be, let's say, loan app. All right, so I mentioned few details about it, and one more thing, one correction you should do over here, it should be capital. Okay. So now we mentioned few details about this thing like name, description, URL, where I'm just putting the GitHub URL over here, email ID, author, and the Python that we required. And these are the informations that your application will use. That means if someone wants to run the application using Python lesser than 3.7, the application may not run. Now we need to locate the requirements.txt as it will contain all the package that needs to be installed. So how can we locate requirement.txt? I'll just access present working directory os.path.directory name of our file, right? So let's see, this is our file. Because in the same location we have requirements.txt, right? So let's see what are we getting. So when I execute it, so this is what we are getting, the ML project. In the ML project, we have this thing. Now we'll just take the absolute path of it, os.path.absolute path. All right. So this is my absolute path in which we have a requirements.txt, isn't it? We have ML project. In the ML project, we have loan app test, readme, requirement.txt. So now we can easily locate requirement.txt and we'll inform through setup file that, okay, these file needs to be installed first. Because earlier when creating the requirement.txt, we install it manually by using pip install r requirement.txt. But this should be automated, isn't it? Automatically, this should get installed when the software is getting installed, right? So that's why we have to make it, we have to automate it so that all the dependencies can be installed automatically. So for that, we'll get the list of packages to be installed. Okay. So to do this thing, we'll create a function over here. Let's say def list requirements. What are the requirements we need that we had mentioned in requirement.txt? So I'll just mention f name will be equals to requirements.txt. All right. Next, we'll access this thing. We have to access this file. So to access this file, we'll make use of file handling concept in Python with open. What we have to just make sure that this from this path, I have to open this file name. So what we do, os dot path dot join, okay, present working directory, comma, the file name, okay, as f. All right. And thereafter, I have to use over here return. So here I have to access each line one by one because we had mentioned everything, all the requirements one by one, right? So that's why we have to mention over here each line one by one. So for that, we'll access the line over here. How can we access for line in F? Okay. And I have to do what? I have to use line dot strip. Okay. Line dot strip for line in F. And we also need to make sure that these lines should not start with hash symbol, isn't it? So we have to do what? If line dot strip, okay, and not line dot starts with, okay, hash symbol. Okay, so this will make sure to read each line that we had mentioned in requirement.txt because it is necessary to access each line over here to final installment, to final installation. Now we want to read the readme file, and for reading the readme file in the setup.py, I also already mentioned over here the logic. First we need to do what? We need to just open the file over here, and then we will just store the information in the long description for every new line. Slash n means what? For every new line we'll just mention the description in the long description, and if file is not there, it will handle the error with the except part. So this is something that we are going to use. So let's use it. Now we have to load the package, whatever the package that we are going to create, version information. And the version information we already mentioned in the version file that we had created in the last class. So for the version information, also I had created the logic over here. If you see, we will load the root directory. All right. So this will be your root directory. All right. And then within the root directory, we are just combining the name of root directory with the loan app. Okay, because we want the version to be accessed from the loan app. So now if I execute it, let's see what output are we getting as a package directory. So this is a package directory, that is our loan app directory. All right. Now what we do based on this particular logic, or from this particular directory, we need version information. So here is what we did for the version. This is something we did, right? So we'll just use it. Okay. So what are we doing? Here we have a about, that is a blank dictionary. Then with open os.path.join, that means package directory over here that we have. So package directory is what is our loan app directory. Within the loan app, we have a version information mentioned over here, isn't it? So from the package directory, we are accessing the version file. And then we are storing this information into the about dictionary. And then if version file is not there, it will generate an error. So I'll save this thing and I'll execute till here and see how it working. Because after this, we have to use the setup function. So everything is running smoothly, right? That means as of now, there is no problem. There might be some problem that we'll fix before distributing it. Next, we require the setup function. In the setup function, we combine everything that we have declared, like these variables and all. So these variables we'll just use in the setup function. So let's see how can we create the setup function. So for setup function, this is something that I created. And about the setup function, I explain in detail in our setup tools tutorial, right? So please go through it whenever you get a time. So I'll copy this unit from here and I'll paste it into our code. Okay. So what all we did, let's check. We have a setup in which we mention name, right? So name is just mentioning the project name. Okay, that is, or application name, that is loan app. The version that we had stored in about, or that is dictionary. Okay, and then we are calling it description. We had mentioned long description also we had mentioned. Then long description content type is markdown, because long description we had mentioned in a MD file. You can see here we are accessing the long description through markdown file, that is readme.md. Author we had mentioned, author email mentioned, and Python that requires that we had mentioned, and we are passing it over here. URL of our application that also we mentioned. Packages, that means find the package. From where it will find the package. So it will just access this package that is mentioned, that is being created over here, and it will not include the test package. Okay, or the test sub package, isn't it? Because test is something that we created just for py testing, right? That we already did. Thereafter, package data, here is a prediction model and version. So in the package data, we are just feeding over here the version, right? Here also we can use loan app prediction model, right? So this will be the package data, some data we can just feed over here. So as of now, I'm just feeding the version information over here. Now we have a install required. What are the install required that we already defined in the function list requires? Okay, so same function we are calling over here. Okay, when we call this, automatically the installation will be done. All right. Extra thing required that I have not mentioned as of now. If anything that you had not mentioned in requirement.txt, you can mention over here. Include the package data. Yes. License we are using MIT because we are creating open source software or open source application. And while creating the open source application, we just mention few things over here so that we can, these are the licensing information which is validated by MIT, so that our open source application can be used by anyone. So this is our final setup file created. Now we need to trigger the setup file so that we can create our distribution file. So how can we trigger the setup file? To trigger the setup file, we'll go to the location where setup file is actually existing. So where is it existing? It is existing in a project folder, right? So let's open the project folder. So it is setup.py, right? So I'll open this particular folder and launch command prompt at this particular location. Okay, and here I have the setup file existing. To trigger the setup file, I'll run Python setup.py sdist to create our distribution folder or distribution file. So this guy will create my distribution file, and if you see, my distribution file is being created and it will be shown in my project folder. So here is my project folder. If you see, this is distribution file. With this distribution file, I have this distribution file and distribution folder. In this distribution folder, I have this distribution file. I'll copy the path of it, right? And I'll get back to the same command prompt, right? And I'll trigger over here pip install this guy. So it shows an error. It is showing that version is not accessible. Okay, the version file is not found. Why it is not found? There can be two reasons behind it. One, the location of version file that I had given may be wrong, or second, the manifest file information may be not correct. So if you see, because I had given the version file location that you can see over here using package directory. And what is package directory? Package directory is your root directory plus name. Root directory plus name means what? Root directory plus lone app, because name is what? Lone app we have defined, isn't it? So root directory plus lone app. In this location, I have what? The version file. And actually version file exists in lone app, if you see. That means there is no problem with the version file. Now let's check the manifest. So in manifest also we included all the text file, right? Now why is it showing error? It is showing error because it is not accessing the manifest file only. Okay, manifest file should be there with the setup file. That means manifest file should not be there within this any other package, right? So manifest file needs to be moved to what? To our main root package. So I'll just cut it and I'll delete this thing from here. Okay, and I'll get back to our main project folder. This is, and here I'll create what? Manifest.in. Please do correct it, right? And now I'll mention whatever that I mentioned earlier. So manifest should be there with the setup file in the same location so that it can easily access it. Now I'll delete the distribution file that is being created. These two files are created. I'll delete both of them. Okay, and once I delete it, again I'll go to the same location. Again I'll launch the command prompt at the same location and we'll see what happened. Right. And here I'll run what? Let's see if my file is existing. Yeah, setup file is there. So I'll run over here Python setup.py sdist. Okay, so my manifest file was not locating properly. That's why it was not including the version file into our distribution, and that's why we are getting the error. Okay, now let's try once again pip install. What install? The installation of our distribution file that is being created. I hope everything works properly now. You can see my application is getting installed. Okay, now how do we check that our application is installed? I'll just run over here Python. Okay, and I'll import the name of our application, which is lone app, right? It can be easily imported. Now within the lone app, I need to do what? I need to run the training module so that my model can get trained, right? So we will just call over here from lone app import training pipeline. All right. So let's see. All right. So now we are getting the error no module name config. Now why are we getting this error? Because my Python can't access the location from where this config package can be imported, isn't it? So we need to do what? We need to make sure that in this training pipeline, we need to add the directory. We need to add the location of this config package into system.package, right? Or system.path. So how can we add it? Let's get back to our coding section. Okay, if you see over here in the lone app, we have two things called training pipeline and predict. So in training pipeline, we just wrote config. So if I'm executing it over here, it is running properly. But when it is being converted into distribution file, at that point of time, Python is Python unable to import this thing because the this particular location is not mentioned in system.path. If you see in predict also we are getting the same problem. Then we did this thing, right? We just added the config root into system path. So same thing I'll copy from here and put it into training pipeline. Okay. So we just copy and pasted it from the predict. So earlier same issue we faced with the predict file and we solved like this. Now we are facing the same issue in the training pipeline after the installation of our distribution file. So just mention it over here, right? Now if I save it and thereafter I'll do the same thing, that means again I'll create the distribution file. First delete the old distribution file. Delete it. Let's get back to our command prompt. So let me launch the command prompt at this location. Here I'll check whether my setup file is there or not. It's there. So I'll run Python setup.py sdist. So it will create my distribution file. Now I'll go to the project directory and I'll copy the path of our distribution file. And then I'll run pip install. So it get installed properly. Now I'll just launch Python interpreter. I will import loan app. Okay. And then I'll again import loan app from loan app, import training pipeline so that my model can get trained. So now it's running smoothly. There is no problem. That means now it can be executed in any system. Next, I'll also show you executing it in a virtual machine, right? I am just running it in the root machine. I'll also check in the virtual machine to be 100% sure that my application can run in any system. Next, we need to call over here training pipeline dot perform training to trigger the training, right? This is the function that we created for performing the training, right? And it will create a pickle file. Something is wrong over here. I may had given incorrect spelling TRAIN. Okay, so this is training pipeline. So now model is saved as a classification.pkl. Now once the model is created, what we do? We can use this model for making the prediction. But for making the prediction, we require data as well. So first I'll also read the data. Okay, so data I can read from the test file. So let's check the location of our test file. So in the loan app, this is a dataset folder. I have a test file over here. I copy the path. So here I'll use data, or you can say test data is equals to pd.read underscore csv. Okay. So it is showing some error over here, invalid argument. The reason I may have to use, either I should use forward slash or I can use R symbol over here to read it. So we successfully read the data. Now after reading the data, we need to predict. So for predicting, what we do, we'll make use of predict file. If you see, here is my predict file, which can make the predictions. It is having the generate predictions function. So what we need to do, we need to call over here from loan app import predict. Okay, so this will call my predict file and then predict dot generate predictions. This is the function. Okay, and in this generate prediction, I'll pass test data. Okay, and I need to pass only one sample, so I'll just use colon. Let's say sample number 1. Okay. So a prediction is Y. That means my application is running successfully after getting installed as well. Next, we need to check how it is running if I create a virtual machine and then I use it. Next, we also check, can we install it from the GitHub? And we also check, can we share it through the PyPy? So these 3 things we are going to do in the next video. Till then, just create your installable file and check if it is running into your system. You can see while creating it, a lot of errors, a lot of things were happened that we just fixed. For example, after creating the setup.py, when we trigger it, we had seen it was not locating versions. So we came to know that either the location of version file is incorrect or it is not accessing manifest file. So we put the manifest file right here, so that it can easily access it, and manifest will include everything that requires. So manifest file we kept over here. Next problem that we faced is related to training pipeline. After execution, we had seen my Python module or the Python was unable to access the config root or the config file, because the root file, because the location of config file was not mentioned in system.path. That's why it was unable to access the config package. So we made this modification in what? In our training pipeline. So after all these changes, my program is running smoothly and it is getting installed, and after getting installed also it is making the predictions. So I hope you can also do it. Still, if you find any other problem, please do comment. We'll try to fix that. Thank you everyone for watching it. We'll see you soon in next part, in which we'll work upon the installation through cloud. Thank you everyone. Take care. Have a great day. Have a nice day. Keep learning and stay safe.